So we've talked about the terrestrial habitats. We've talked about the aquatic habitats. Now let's talk about the organisms that live there. There are a lot of organisms native to these particular regions. But sometimes, when a new organism is introduced into the region, they can wreak ecological havoc. So we're going to explain the environmental effect of invasive species. Species are distributed across the planet, and that distribution is based primarily on evolutionary history combined with ecological factors. So if you think about it, an organism is going to evolve in a certain region to take advantage of the resources in that region. But sometimes the ecology shifts. Sometimes there's a flood. Sometimes there's a fire. Things change. And humans are causing an amazing amount of change that are forcing animals to either adapt or die off. Organisms need to move through a process called dispersal. This is where a group of organisms is going to fan out from their original location. Humans originated in I think it's a 10-kilometer square region of Africa. We've traced it back to exactly where humans came from. And then we expanded outwards. That's dispersion. We then went to every other continent. Heck, a dandelion. I'm sure you guys have blown on a dandelion at some point in your life. And then you became an adult and you're like, I don't want those in my yard. When you blow on a dandelion, all of those seeds disperse. The dandelion was in one place, and now, so I'm the good one, right? I'm just like, kids, go ahead and blow them. Just blow them into the neighbor's yard. Now they've dispersed from my yard to their yard, moving away from the origin. Most organisms that are isolated due to their lack of dispersion, not because they can't live somewhere else, but because for some reason there's something blocking them from expanding outward. Here, there's a vast ocean. Here's a pond. What's preventing these pond organisms from escaping to the ocean and being free? There's land. Land sucks for fish. Some of them. We'll learn about some that doesn't really hinder much. But for a lot of fish, they can't get through that land barrier, which means they are stuck. There's no way they can disperse outward. If there was an endemic species, a species that lives just right there, they would not be able to go any farther out. So if something happened to that lake or that pond, that whole species would die off due to lack of dispersal. If you're able to take an organism out of that pond, if you're able to take an organism from one area and put it in a new area and they survive and they reproduce, the reason they were isolated is likely due to geographic isolation, not because there was something that was inherently wrong with the organism. Humans are great at moving things from one place to another. What was it called? How many you guys have taken history? Some of you have taken history. Have you ever heard of the Spanish exchange? All right, good. You got something, right? So here we're taking New World fruits and vegetables and we're moving them back to Europe. The reason we didn't have the potato in Europe wasn't because the potato couldn't survive in Europe. The reason we didn't have the potato in Europe was because there's a freaking ocean stopping potatoes from getting there. That's a geographic isolating issue that stops dispersal, not because the organism itself could not survive. So we're notorious for this. Let's take this cool thing that we like here and move it over there. We're going to take dogs to Alaska because, we want a pet. So when Europeans discovered Australia, they took dogs. They took dogs to Australia because they liked having their companions with them. And when the dogs got there, they were happy. Just like, you put a dog on a beach, they bounce around. These dogs were very happy and they thrived because they were a top-tier predator. Those dogs went on to breed and become the dingoes. The Aboriginals also, they brought some species, but the Europeans brought the big ones. And then there was crossbreeding. Oh, it's a mess. Invasive species are those that will successfully breed and compete with existing species. Have you guys ever seen these bugs? They're annoying. Where do they live? In your house, in your kitchen. They are out competing local insects. They're not native to this area. They're not native to this country. You see them so much because they are invasive. They're out competing local insects. So here's the deal. We move produce, we move resources all over the world. We do this in order to make our lives easier. These guys, these stink bugs may have gotten here through agricultural products. Heck, sometimes there have been plenty of people who are bitten by spiders just trying to pick up bananas. Because as you pick bananas in tropical regions, there are plenty of spiders around. Those spiders are not regional to our area. They'll die in the winter, but they'll survive a little bit. We introduced, by accident, tree snakes to Guam. Guam was a bird paradise. There were birds they were singing birds. There were native species that weren't seen anywhere else in the world. And we accidentally, again, in our shipping crates, brought the tree snake. Now, instead of having birds singing in the trees, literally snakes will fall out of the trees. Yeah, that's super fun, right? Rats. Rats are native to China. They weren't introduced to, they got introduced to Europe after we started having more trade flow. We have all of these species that we've decided to move from one place. No, we didn't decide. They just hitched a ride. Heck, we are able to trace human migration patterns by looking at the genetics of fruit flies. Because wherever people went, they took flies with them. By accident. They're not like packing up their pet fly. But wherever we had food, flies left with us. So we're able to track human patterns and human trade patterns through the movement of genes. The Florida python is probably one of the most well-known invasive species in America. In Florida, the Florida Everglades are a wonderfully warm tropical region. It hardly ever freezes. It is a great place for reptiles. That's why we have alligators living there. Alligators don't live all over the world. They really just live in that region. Hold on. Alligators survive there just fine. It's a nice warm region. Turns out pythons can live there fine too. After some hurricanes, and I'm sure some accidental pet releases, large ball pythons have gotten loose into, not just ball pythons, large pythons have gotten loose into the Florida Everglades. They're now not just competing with the alligators, they're actively hunting the alligators. In fact, in this image, you can see a python has swallowed an alligator, and when they swallowed, this is a lose-lose situation. They swallowed the alligator, but the alligator's claw was out, and so as it's being pushed down into the python, the claw slid right down the python and sliced it open. So that didn't work out. Two birds with one stone. The alligator's dead. The python's dead. The alligator was strangled to death. Sometimes the alligator wins. Here you can see one with a python in its mouth. Sometimes the python wins. But you know who doesn't win? Deer. Yeah. Deer, raccoons. Most of the small mammals have been eaten out of the Florida Everglades. They just aren't there anymore because there's so many pythons. It's gotten so bad that there's literally a bounty on pythons in the Everglades. You can hunt as many of them as you want. You don't have to do, people are hunting them now for their skin. They're hunting them for all sorts of things. Pythons, not alligators. And then I believe you brought up there are alligators up north now, right? Yeah, there are. As the climate's been changing, alligators are moving farther and farther north. The traditional northernmost range of the American alligator is Norfolk. There have been sightings, and I kid you not, in Mechanicsville. So there are plenty of movement of these large reptiles. The warmer it gets farther north, the more likely they can survive winters. The northern snakehead. This is a cautionary tale that's fairly recent and affects a lot of northern Virginia. The northern snakehead story, you get the whole story because I was very interested in this. Once upon a time, there was a man who wanted to help his sick wife. There was an old folk medicine that was you make her soup out of snakeheads. Snakeheads are endemic to China. So they went to a fish market and bought fresh northern snakeheads on ice. Brought them home, and his wife got better. So he put the northern snakeheads into a tank of water, and they were alive because they were very fresh. He didn't want to kill them, though. So what he did was he released them into a drainage pond in the back of a shopping center. You guys know what a drainage pond is, just level water. We've got drainage ponds all over the campus. He released them into there and didn't think anything else of it. 2 years later, there's a boy and his dad were fishing in that retention pond because apparently people do that. I had no idea. And they reeled in a fish they'd never seen before. So they took a picture and they sent it to, this is up in Maryland. This is in Clifton, Maryland, I think. They took a picture and they sent it to the Department of Wildlife for Maryland. And the Department of Wildlife flipped out because this species is a top-of-tier predator in China. And it's in this pond. So they came over to see what the damage was. Maybe it's just one. Right? Well, there was 2 of them, and it just happened that the 2 that they had was a male and a female. So they go fishing, and they pull in about 30, and they said, this is bad. So they decide they're going to, they're not going to blow up the lake. The first thing they did was they electrocuted it. Yeah, so not blow it up, they electrocute it, because what happens is when you run an electric charge through water, it's going to stun the fish. So the fish started coming up. So where they stunned them, then they started counting even more. They're like, oh, crap, this lake is filled with these fish. Now, these fish are also cannibals. They didn't find many other species, just snakeheads in there now. So what they did next was they said, okay, this is an emergency. We're going to kill the pond. Not drain it. We're going to kill everything in there. So they added a chemical to the pond that made it so fish can't breathe through their gills. So what happens? The fish start to suffocate, except these particular fish are very well adapted to survive. They're air breathers. They come up to the surface to breathe. So when they put this poison in, suddenly all over the lake, you've got fish coming up to breathe, and it's just filled with snakeheads. So they said, okay, new plan. We're draining it. Well, they can breathe air, but they're like, we've got to collect them all up, get them on kill them all. You don't just, they're not going to drop bombs on a shopping center in Maryland. I think. So they went, if they drain the lake, maybe they use flamethrowers on them, I don't know. So they drain the lake. They collect all these guys, problem solved. Killed every one of them. Except this particular, no, it's not even just a one thing. This particular drainage pond was about 20 feet away from the Potomac River. And it turns out the northern snakehead, using these very, very strong pectoral fins, could move along along muddy ground. So when it rained, turns out, not all of them, but enough of them went into the Potomac and were able to start a breeding population of the Potomac. So in the past 15 years, past 10 years, they've been eating their way down the Potomac, heading toward the Chesapeake Bay. Now, there are a lot of factors that can stop these invasive species, and a lot of factors that control species movement in general. Some factors are biotic. Biotic means living organisms. By having a predator, you can maintain a level of a prey population. For the northern snakehead, there's just no predator out there. Except when it gets closer to the Chesapeake Bay, you're going to end up with bull sharks. They'll take care of the problem. But a lot of organisms, we've tried this time and time again. We have a problem organism. So we get a new organism to try and attack it. And then that one becomes a problem organism. So what do? We get another organism. And you know, now that I think about it, do you guys know this, the nursery rhyme? There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. That's the whole process, literally. Well, she swallowed a fly, so what do you need? You need a spider. All right, so she swallowed a spider. What did she need after that? She needed a frog to catch the spider, to eat the fly. Okay, so what after the frog, what did she go for? A bird. After a bird, the cat. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And then she died. It's all about invasive species and how to control them properly. Bringing in a new species to attack an old species generally is not going to work. Why do we keep doing it? Because we are humans, and we tend to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. For evidence, please see your love lives. Politeness, right?
Don't look at me.
Not only are there biotic factors, there's abiotic factors. These abiotic factors, non-living, are going to hinder a species' ability to thrive in a particular area. Temperature, water, the amount of oxygen present, salinity, and sunlight. You guys know what salinity means? Salt. So how might temperature affect it? Seriously. Right, if it's too hot and your enzymes are not evolved to live in that hot environment, you're going to denature. Those enzymes you won't denature. Your enzymes will denature, and you're not going to be able to undergo metabolic processes. How much water is present? Living on land, we've had to adapt to conserve water inside of us. We are bags of water walking around hoping to maintain chemical reactions inside of ourselves. We've adapted to carry our water with us. Oxygen. Oxygen levels in water vary tremendously. Some organisms can live in low oxygen environments, but most need high amounts of oxygen. What do you need oxygen to do? To breathe. Why? What's that process? Aerobic cellular respiration. It gives you a lot of ATP. Salinity. If it's too salty, what passive process do you have to worry about? If the osmosis, if it's too salty around you, you're going to lose water. And the name of the game when you're living on land is hold water on the inside. And of course, the amount of sunlight present. So all of these are abiotic factors. So between the biotic factors and the abiotic factors, you're going to control for dispersal of an organism. These biotic and abiotic factors will also influence not just the dispersal, but the dispersal patterns. Different populations are going to disperse in different ways. This is a tree. We're good on that, right? What do you notice about this tree? It's all by itself. This is a solitary dispersal pattern. It's showing, and it's probably going to end up showing a uniform dispersal pattern, because that tree is putting out secondary metabolites, when in doubt, right? Secondary metabolites to suppress the growth of anything around it.